I object to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary. The evil it does is permanent. Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi, of course, is a figure who he has his own share of criticisms, as many important historical figures. And as many who kind of bore such great responsibility one way or the other, at the end of the day, he had to pick a path in order to carry that out. And at least publicly, he picked one of nonviolence, one of peace, one of dialogue and negotiation. And for the most part, it has come off successful, or at least his critics probably should not disagree that he's perceived as coming off successful. And he's not the only world leader who has done so. Of course, Nelson Mandela also famously strove not just for peace with regards to how he protested and fought against apartheid, but then afterwards, he did not seek reprisals or restitutions, but rather integration. And now we're at a point in time, a moment in history when, politically speaking, around the Western world, it's a zero-sum game. For me to win, you must lose. Only when you lose, I can win. And the whole idea about a democratic system of government more or less goes against that in principle. The point is not one party wins, one party loses, and then we fight it out, and the minority is fighting an uphill battle against the majority. Now, on the surface, on a basic level, it's very easy with basic human nature for it to be so. But the idea would have been the majority voice picks the government, and then throughout the representatives, whoever they may be voted for, whoever, etc., whatever they represent, they will then come together and vote on legislation to represent the people who they were selected to represent the specific needs of Mayaro, of St. Anne's, of Blanchisseuse, and the Tunapuna, and so forth and so forth. Not necessarily to represent political ideologies per se. Yes, an MP for a political party was elected based on the fact that, one, he's the MP of said party, two, his individual track record in theory. And to some extent, his views, what you would expect, would be in line with his political party's ideologies. But on some level, there's also needs to be a certain amount of concession to what his individual constituency requires, what his individual constituency needs. And when done properly, political disagreements do not turn into what they turn into. And to some extent, maybe I'm wrong saying it's modern Western democracies, because one could argue in ancient Rome, this sort of politicking happened. Famous historical figure Julius Caesar was involved, he and his allies and the Roman Senate at the time had a serious amount of politicking, and who was with what clique and who was on whose side. And in many ways, how we're being run around the world that espouses to be democracies, that espouses to be lands of freedom and opportunity, we're being run like if we're at a secondary school or a high school, or some petty office with petty office politics. But what really gets it bad is when the language used, and I have mentioned this before, when the rhetoric starts to become more and more absolutist and extreme. they're not just wrong, they're wicked. They're not just wicked, they're evil. They're not just evil, they're the root of all of your problems. It's not just about selecting change, it's about voting them out of office, no matter what the change might be. It's not about just voting them out of office. It's about blaming them for everything. Whoever them is, whichever side you espouse them to be. They are the problem. We're not the problem, they are the problem. They are so much the problem, the implication is they should be removed. And we got to see what that looks like in America when the legal system has been used against sitting presidents more than once, because the Republicans went after Clinton over something frivolous. Now the Democrats more recently went after Trump for something equally as frivolous. Even this criminal prosecution case, from what I understand, no other district attorney would have touched it. And at the end of the day, the crimes that is supposed to be condemned doesn't really mean anything. It's not really going to do anything. Hence why it's not as though anything is being done to remove him from campaigning to be the next president. But the rhetoric got to the point where I'm surprised the individual involved is not even more politically connected. But we'll get onto that later. The rhetoric, when you turn the other side into the enemy. And the whole point is, aren't we kind of doing that here? And then what feeds into that is when the Sedition Act is used willy-nilly. When lawsuits are thrown about, when accusations of corruption are thrown about, but yet we can't seem to prosecute them. When bombastic rhetoric is thrown about willy-nilly, and no one is thinking about the precedent it sets, because if it's good for me to call this person the most vile creature to ever exist and he should be eradicated, I won't say he should be eradicated, but I'll basically describe him in such a way that that is at least one conclusion. Well, then at some point, if it's not used against me, it'll be used against my side. The Republicans didn't necessarily think about the precedent they set when they tried to impeach Clinton over nonsense that had nothing to do with his office. Well, it was in his office, but it had nothing to do with the office he held. So to some extent, I didn't necessarily care about the Republican Party crying over the impeachment of Donald Trump. It's like, well, as a party, I know most of y'all weren't there when it happened, but you have to kind of face the music. Your predecessors set you up to fail because they set a bad precedent. The other side is allowed to follow it. But we live in a country where both sides, when they're ready, uses some ridiculous over-the-top political language in a country where the murder rate, the improved murder detection rate for 2024, it rose to 10%. Do we not see an issue here? And I'll caution about this type of speech because it can't, I'll never be one to say words of violence. That ideology to me is ridiculous. But I will say this, words can lead to violence. And I'm getting particularly frustrated at the unprofessionalism and the immaturity of too many of our public speakers. I understand emotion gets the better of you and you could have an outburst, you know, every now and then, but that should be the exception, not the norm. And for some politicians, that is their norm. And the sad part about it is, and I'll always come back to this point, to some extent, we the people are responsible because that's what we want to hear. We want to hear our side winning and their side losing, as though governance is a game and there are winners and losers. As though somehow, if half the country is losing, we don't seem to understand they're gonna drag, they're losing, they're forced to lose. It's gonna drag the rest of us down. And it's not necessarily their fault. because we want them to lose, and we'll encourage them to lose in however which way we can manipulate whatever which system we can. So Mr. Gandhi said it right. Most people will think, yes, yes, violence bad, objected. No. The key point of what he said was, the good is only temporary. No matter how justified we think it might be, the evil it does is permanent. Once you open Pandora's box, you can't get the evils back inside, at least not without significant effort and sacrifice. All right, with all of that said, I'll actually continue on this, but we'll do so as we start actually the daily review. And like I said, we'll continue because I want to keep on this story. Of course, as you know, former president and current, I believe he's the presumed Republican nominee, Donald Trump, was shot at. I'm not entirely too sure how serious I take the threat. Ironically, yes, he was inches away from getting killed, but this was not, at least in my opinion, some big conspiracy. This was one young man, I believe he's 20 years old, who it's not entirely known exactly why he did what he did. But I think the key point in all of this is to understand that, listen, look at the conditions that potentially could have caused this to happen and understand that a lot of those conditions exist here. And our public figures are more vulnerable than we think. And I've refrained from saying this directly for quite some time. Political leader of the NTA and a national security practitioner, I guess you could say, for all of his different roles that he has had. He has spoken out about in what he feels are deficiencies in security for officials. But I'll go a different path because to some extent, even our prime minister will not have a level of protective detail that a former American president has. And his protective detail, arguably, there are a lot of questions with regards to how that could have happened. I would say, well, look, he doesn't have a presidential detail. He's a former president. There's only going to be so much resources allocated to a former president, no matter who it is. And it could have just been a crack, a slip in the crack. I mean, still, the measure should have prevented it from being so close, but at the end of the day, they have limited resources. Our own protection services have more limited resources. I don't think there would be a way to ensure that our officials would have a reasonable guarantee for safety, unless they never appear publicly. And therein is why I started off the show where I started it off. The most important factor in the safety of our elected officials is to ensure an environment where such a thing is unlikely to happen. And then other sub-factors play into that. One, of course, is the fact that if we live in a country where people perceive to be able to get scot-free away for murder, well, that's what point do they put two and two together? But more importantly, as I said, the rhetoric of politics plays into this. Even if we had 100% detection rate for murder, somebody somewhere will get in their brain that, look, I will be a martyr for the cause, for my political ideology, and I'll take a shot. Reagan's attacker, he had no plan for escape. He walked right up to Reagan and shot him. The thing is, with regards to Trump's shooter, it's unclear what political ideology he followed. He apparently is registered as a Republican, but he donated to the Democratic Party. In his life, he is not necessarily identified by individuals as being anyone with strong political beliefs. To some extent, they didn't say he was bullied, although he seems to be an outcast. So it could have been someone who A young man lacking identity, lacking direction, lacking hope for his future. He grasped onto whatever political message struck a nerve with him at the time. Or maybe there's a chance it didn't matter who it was. It could have been Biden, it could have been Trump. It really didn't matter. He wanted to take a shot at a political figure. We don't necessarily know. We have many of those risk factors here. As our economy continues to not do so well, as opportunities dry up, at some point, somebody is going to conduct political violence. I'm sorry, some people might say that's an inflammatory statement, but at this, I don't know. I think it's a late statement to make. If you haven't had this thought already, I think you're kind of behind. And I don't want to see anything like this happen, regardless of who the target is. Particularly because we ourselves have already seen, and I'll get into this just now, the trend of wrong place, wrong time, collateral deaths when gangsters are killing gangsters. Lord only knows if we could even believe that to be true anymore. But look, even in this situation, there were people who were collateral deaths. And that's one of the issues that I have. Our political figures are out in the public. If anyone takes a shot at them, other people might also be in the line of fire. And the type of weapon used to shoot at Trump at what is believed to be a distance of 150 yards, those are in the hands of criminals. We just haven't necessarily seen criminals use their weapons in that manner. But the capability is there. It's out in the public. I'm not revealing anything that should be extraordinary and secretive. And I believe at the very least with this shooting, the proverbial cat is out of the bag, out into the public sphere. We are connected to American media. Our criminals will see that trend. Will they think to follow it? I don't know. Sorry, it's not a trend yet. It's one anecdote. It's one example. Can they follow it? I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking. All I know is that it does not help when we have over-the-top rhetoric on top of a situation where our economic situation, our social situation, arguably is degrading. And at what point will the politicians begin to understand, whoa, maybe we kind of need to be careful with what precedent we set. That's why even though we haven't had a bombing, I'm going to take every bomb threat seriously. I'm going to take every threat against anybody's life seriously. I will tell law enforcement, underestimate nothing, overestimate if necessary everything. Because right now, only by the grace of God has things not gotten worse. Let's move on. Well, with that said, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll go into the next story, which ties into some of what I was saying towards the end there. Stay tuned. This is Talking About on WESL. We'll be right back after this. So over the weekend, there was, up until a police media briefing, 14 murders. And then a 15th happened apparently 2 hours after the media briefing. The media briefing was in Port of Spain. The 15th murder happened on Charlotte Street, from what I understand. And in that media briefing, the Commissioner of Police said, we have not lost a handle on crime. This was an answer of a direct question on whether or not the police did lose a handle on crime. And I will be surprised if anybody believes that statement. I don't think for 1 second that the reason why our murder rate is at the level that it is because successful efforts have managed to, at the very least, suppress its continued growth. Because at the end of the day, in what world does a 10% detection rate be considered successful? If 9 out of 10 murderers go undetected, we don't potentially figure out who they are. We don't start potentially investigating them in order to arrest and charge them. So obviously, we can't convict them. If 10% go, 90% goes undetected, could we really seriously make an argument that the police efforts are enough to keep the murder rate under control? And therefore, if murder is out of control, we do have to ask the question, to what extent is it police efforts that are directly and mainly responsible for keeping other violent crimes and other serious offenses down? Or to what extent is it just, well, criminals have decided not to do that right now, or they're not reported? There are other factors for crime to exist or not exist. Certain offenses might seem to not be profitable, other offenses might be profitable, and then criminals will adjust. How much extortion goes unreported? To some extent, the commissioner kind of revealed the fact that statistics can be analyzed and interpreted in various ways, and perhaps the analysis given to us by the executive of the police service, maybe we should take it with a grain of salt, because kidnappings have increased by 100% between this time last year and this year. Now, ironically, this is a statistic in her favor, because it went from 1 to 2. Do I care that it went from 1 to 2? On a macro level, no. On an individual level, yes, obviously. We would prefer that there be no kidnappings at all, but zero crime, I think, is an idealistic pipe dream that no one could realistically expect any police service to achieve. But the point is, that's just to show you how a statistic can be meaningless when faced with practical reality. And the practical reality is, I cannot reasonably think that you have a handle on crime if the murder rate is potentially out of control. And the commissioner and the executive, they more or less admitted, first of all, mass shootings, the trend is continuing. I think most of the killings were either double homicides or there was one triple homicide. And we're getting some of the same things. All stations on high alert. The TTPS will continue to fight with more and more patrols and a constant presence by the police. Blah, 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 visibility in the ground. Just when did we have the triple murder in Tobago? And then we saw increased police presence all over the place, I think, in Diego Martin, in Tobago. Cool. Now, at least in Tobago, I could see where some extra police presence will have an impact in the short run, but it's not sustainable. That's point number one. Point number two, in Trinidad, you've already put all stations on high alert. Not so? You've already pushed all hands on deck, redouble efforts after we redouble efforts, after we redouble efforts, after we redouble efforts. At this point, we are times 64 on our efforts of police to deal with murders. It's the same words. It's the same result. I'm supposed to believe that you have not lost a handle on crime? Well, there's some truth in that statement. One could argue that the current police executive never had a handle on crime. So they never had one to lose in the first place. That is to some extent unfair. Yes, I know. They met a situation that was bad, and it hasn't really improved. It improved by a statistically small enough amount, and it still was within a range that I think is high and unacceptable, particularly with the detection rate. And yes, I will harp on that till the cows come home, because it is ridiculous to be what it is and to get communication like this. Because at the end of the day, there's way too much pride and not enough accountability in statements like this. Now, maybe some of the deputy commissioners of police, they could be excused because some of them are new. They don't have a track record. But at what point do I just not want to hear you say your rhetorical nonsense anymore? Because at the end of the day, while you are happy to put on your past accomplishments, Commissioner of Police, you know, your legacy is more or less ensured, your retirement, you're at the highest level, right? When you retire now, that's a title that will be with you forever. Former Commissioner of Police. I get it. That's nice. And to some extent, the price for your career has been paid by all of the people who died potentially unnecessarily. And that's a subjective concept. It's hard to know objectively how much better somebody else would have done. But given the performance, given the results, given the manner of which the job is being done, given the execution or lack thereof, I will argue that to some extent, while people are enjoying their new higher profile job, their new higher profile title, and potentially all of the benefits that come with that, people are dying. It's not about, oh, people are being mistreated and they're not getting the FULs. That's one thing. There's not some administrative thing and ease of doing business is bad. And why does it take so long for me to get through with this bureaucracy where other people get through and it's unfair? We ain't talking about that. We ain't talking about bad things that are at a lower level. No. We're going to the top. Murders are out of control. You do not have a handle. You never had a handle. God could probably give you 2 handles and you would lose them. They would fall out of your hands as soon as you reach for them. At the rate things are going. It's frustrating. At some point, I've already started asking, will I be next? When will I be next? That's where we've reached in our society. And I wonder if there's anybody out there who potentially somehow is confident that they won't be next. Should anybody be confident? I don't think so. 15 for the weekend. That's an average of approximately 5 per day. They already said, all hands on deck, we're doubling down. We're going to do something about this when we just saw 3 murders in Tobago. And it's almost like if the Trinidad gangs wanted to say, hold on, we're not done. Don't be fooled. Meanwhile, the commissioner is saying gangs are getting desperate. I find that very hard to believe. How many gangsters have been arrested for being in a gang and then successfully prosecuted, convicted, and then imprisoned? And then when they're in prison, how many of them have lost to a reasonable extent, that is to say, mostly, access to communication with the outside world? How many of them no longer have police officers and prison officers in their back pockets? When you could deal with that, when you could arrest gang members based on the anti-gang bill, when you could break up gang operations, when you could get at least, I don't know what will be reasonable, 30, 40% of murderers? 50%? Really, it should be something like 80, 90%. But right now I'm begging for half. Maybe that's not reasonable. Maybe it's not, right? Although we're a small island, where do they go? Where could they hide? When witnesses are not afraid for their life, maybe when we could see some of these things, effective policing, not just ineffective lip service, then I will consider taking such rhetoric seriously. It's a challenging weekend for you. It was a deadly weekend for 15 people. I think to some extent the commission doesn't seem to understand. It's one thing for a politician to give out rhetoric. The damage they do at least cannot be directly seen. The economic damage done by government policies cannot always be directly seen by the people. But I could count caskets. Anybody could count caskets. The homeless man on the street with no education could count caskets. The primary school student could count caskets. And they'll ask the question, why is it so bad? And what will be the answer that we could give them? Because you wouldn't understand, and it's big people thing, and it's complicated, just isn't good enough when we're putting people in the ground. But you know what? It's all right. It's all right. Because whoever side you pick is we time, right? That'll solve all of our problems. Moving on to something that's important to me at this very moment. Ministry of Health officials have warned against overspray and the reliance, of course, given the situation with the, I don't know how to explain it. It might not just be in Trinidad, it might be all over the region and around the world. For whatever reason, this season, the mosquitoes have decided to once again attempt to take over the world. And it is hitting certain parts of the country extremely hard, from what I understand. And right now, people are calling, myself included, at least before I read these articles, what the minister had to say, as well as the head of Vector Control Division. I was wondering, where's the spraying? Well, they're warning that, look, if we spray too much, and it's similar, I guess you could say, to antibiotics. And it could be, I don't know if it's because the technical nature of the types of pesticides that the Vector Control Division would be using, ultra low volume spraying. If they spray today too much, in a couple of years, the chemicals might not work at all. And then we would have a bigger problem. And it's a similar situation that is seen with regards to antibiotics. Resistances could be built up. And one could say, well, you know, my fly spray at home, I never saw an insect with resistances. Well, I wonder if those chemicals would technically be harsher than what vector control would spray. But then they're also warning that, look, at some point, even if it's more suitable to spray these chemicals to the general environment, it's going to start to decimate other life forms, not just mosquitoes, in the ecosystem, potentially devastating the ecosystem, causing unknown problems there. But then also, at some point, it could be harmful to humans, which is why the minister has gone on to say we need to deal with preventative measures. And I understand that. Now, I'm not fully 100% up on the science. I don't know what chemicals they use, so it's not as though I could start researching how those chemicals are employed and what is the risk of insects building up a resistance to those chemicals. But at the end of the day, one does have to argue, can we spray ourselves out of this problem? Then the minister went on to warn against using genetically modified mosquitoes, saying that the science is not tested or the science is not secure or necessarily sound. Now, I do know that it's been used with a certain species of fly. And I would imagine that to some extent, the efforts to control that fly population is ongoing. So it's not like you have one genetically modified fly and then you just keep reusing that over and over and over again. I would imagine that labs continue to monitor the situation, and that would make any sort of endeavor like that particularly expensive because it'll be ongoing. It's not like you invest the capital once and you just reuse the same technology exactly over and over. Some of the technology, of course, you're reusing. Some of it you have to keep developing. And the minister warned against mutations, which is probably one of the reasons why you would have to continue to develop new variants or new modifications to mosquitoes if you wanted to attack them along that angle. The thing is, I know it works for flies. I don't know if it'll work for mosquitoes. The question is, if it is mainly cost prohibitive, should that be enough of a barrier? Because now we do have to ask to what extent will dengue be a risk to our nation's productivity and economy? And of course, then there's also the fact people are dying. I think this is one of the instances where the government is going to face an uphill battle. And yes, the minister did argue, don't politicize the issue, the opposition is politicizing it. But to some extent, which came first, the opposition politicizing it or the people wanting to see certain things done? And will they believe government officials on the science or not? Will they believe what the Minister of Health, Terence Yalsing, had to say? The head of vector control and other officials with regards to the risks of overspraying and using genetically modified mosquitoes, I don't know. And depending on how bad the situation gets and how much more desperate people are, because the government has a perception deficit, because people are prone to disbelieve them, even if this is the right thing, this also might come to bite them in the next election because they set themselves up for failure because they did not work hard enough with regards to transparency, with regards to building up public trust and confidence. They only have themselves to blame. And therein lies the unfortunate reality that I don't think a lot of politicians understand, but I'll leave that for another day. Let's take a break. When we come back, hopefully we'll have the TTPS media ambassador here with us today. I know we didn't have him last week. Things didn't work out for various reasons, but we'll have him here today. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN show. Michael Small. We'll be right back after this.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokaram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talk About, and joining me in our studio in Willowbrook, we have TTPS Media Ambassador, ASP Ashraf Ali. Good morning, sir. It's good to see you over the virtual space. We didn't get a chance last week. I think maybe for the first time in a while we haven't had a media ambassador for the TTPS for a week.
Well, sometimes things do happen, and it's not a good morning, I would say. We had some not for the TTPS on the whole, but for Trinidad and Tobago as a country. Over the weekend, we had a number of homicides, which is alarming in the level of violence that we are seeing exhibited by these individuals. So it is a serious concern. The violence and the violence had been exhibited in a number of shootings that resulted in fatalities, and the brazenness of the individuals in open spaces just we wonder at what point in time this level of, how we could control this level of violence, because the individuals are just a level of underlining issue with respect to violence and violent nature of these individuals that at any point in time they can explode. We have this cross-gang violence issue. So it's something that we have to treat with. We are treating with it to the best that we can in the current environment.
Well, now I don't know if you were there at the studio, because I took serious issue with the messaging from the executive, because we basically got the same old story. Something to the effect of we'll put more effort into it. But we've more or less seen this song and dance played out over and over. I'm not going to ask you to answer for what your superiors said. I will ask you this though, and this is something that I've asked before. To what extent is there more left in the tank of police officers to give for there to be more of a presence, for there to be more patrols, for there to be more officers on duty, when I've already been concerned ever since COVID, and with the requirements to deal with school violence and other requirements of the police, that, look, I don't think, yes, there'll be more officers coming down the pipe, but there'll be recruits, there'll be rookies, there'll be raw. I don't know how much more for the officers who are doing the work to hold it together. Is there anything left in the tank to give before you all kind of run yourselves ragged?
Well, I guess at this point in time we already crossed the reserves. Right? We are actually on our reserves. We already crossed the reserves already, so it's not no running no ragged anymore. We are already running ragged. And the thing about it is that Trinidad and Tobago, the level of violence in Trinidad and Tobago, you're seeing it emanating from many different areas, and it's only so much we can treat with certain type of violence. Right? At some point in time, we have to realize that there is going to be a change in the mindset of individuals, because it's only so much I don't think this country is going to be able to take on when it comes to the level of violence. But when you look at the crimes that is taking place, it is sporadic across the country. It is not to say it is isolated in one area. Every so often you see something popping up in all across the area where you have violence taking place. And one of the things that we keep enforcing is that we want to keep our presence on the streets, because we know that these persons committing offenses on the streets, using vehicles and even from point A to point B and going back, and then afterwards you see these vehicles are being abandoned in communities, which is very interesting, and a lot of persons are understanding that. The vehicles that have been used are abandoned within close proximity of communities that we know that is involved in some of these criminal elements. Right? And how do we get the community to come out and kick against it? Are we saying that the community is accepting it? I can't see that communities are accepting that, but that is why we keep on asking for the support of the public, because we need to get those individuals who are continuously committing these type of offenses to be dealt with in the law. Right? So that is why our community engagements, it might sound like as a repeat of what we are doing, but in order for us to get a grip on it, we need the trust, we need the public to have trust and confidence in the police service, and at the same time, we need to depend on the public to assist us, because these individuals are not staying in your home or my home, so Sean. they are living in communities where we have persons who know those individuals who are living in those communities. They may not know if they're involved directly in any criminal offense, but they are living in communities. And when you go on social media, you are seeing the images of these persons portraying, posting up with heavy-powered weapons, and still, this is the images. This is the type of images we have the youths of today and the young generation growing up seeing what it is to be a criminal. I mean, we are trying to change the young minds, but at the same time we are being pushed doing it simultaneously with enforcement, social programs to work simultaneously. The hard approach is what you need right now because of the fact that the level of violence in our society, level of lawlessness is what you need. But at the same time, we have to balance it with the soft approach because this is the generation that you're looking at for them not to go across the line into the criminal elements. Long ago, you normally would have asked a child what you want to be. A doctor, a lawyer, a fireman, a police, a garbage collector, or whatever he wants to be, he or she wants to be. Because as a profession, it's unfortunate right now that some of these youths saying, I want to be a gangster. Right?
Well, and to some extent, I do believe that economics does play a part in it because, like right now in the United States, analysts are pointing to the fact that, look, when you compare the relative buying power of people in their 20s, in the 50s, 70s, and now in the 2020s, there's a stark difference. The percentage of the average income that it would have taken to buy a house is much higher now than it was before. And I think TNT is facing similar things where a lot of people might want to say, well, young people don't work. Well, part of the problem is the amount of work they're going to have to put in order to earn money to do things like buying a house, buying a car, etc. It's just going to be more. It's just going to be more difficult. It's just going to be more expensive. Even after you adjust for inflation. It's not about inflation. It's about the relative amount. You know, instead of 20% of my income, it's going to be 50% of my income. Instead of saving for 2 months, I'm going to have to be saving for 6 months or 2 years. And looking at that analysis, but then there's also the fact that not only is the difficulty of the economic situation kind of pushing young people in one direction, but and one of the topics you want to speak about was violence against children. I do wonder when children become victims of violence or exposed or witness adults or others be victims of violence, it potentially normalizes it to them. It makes it seem less of a taboo and more as well an everyday thing that I see it, other people are doing it. Why should I not do it? Particularly if the more legitimate aspects of society are not working for me. So that's on one side. Violence in my environment is normalized. That's the other side. And I'm kind of not surprised, or rather I should say, I'm kind of surprised for people who might not understand or who might themselves be surprised at the fact that young people are looking to essentially be gangsters more and more.
And it's interesting, and it's so true because when you look at some of these crimes that the crimes that has taken place, the tragedy of some of those crimes where you have children being injured in some of these the shootings turn fatal, where children are being injured in it. It shows that in and around these societies, these communities where there are children are also exposed to it in some manner. We have criminal acts taking place in the community. We have the use of drugs. We have use of and the use of violence. You see persons carrying guns in certain areas, and children are being exposed to this type of life. How do we change those mindsets? It's good.
There was one other thing that I wanted to bring up as well, and one of the crimes that I am seeing more and more And maybe there's more to the story than we know, but until we get the details, I'll go with what's been reported. Young people who want to be legitimate, who want to build something for themselves, whether a small business, whether to work in a private company or get a government job, or in one case, as you were speaking off air, with regards to the young man that was, who now started driving for TT Rideshare. Like, I do wonder if to some extent, other young people and children will see the ones trying to do the right thing. It doesn't just not work out for them, they end up getting killed. And all of this psychologically could put pressure on them to not step out of line. The community is, we're all gangsters, let's be gangsters. I don't want to step out of line. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down.
And it's true, because there are instances where they may have chosen to leave that life or deviate from that life to make a better life for themselves, and they will be forced to do they will be forced within a certain circle. And it's challenging because it's our youths, and it's youths and young people that we are trying to change, of continuing along this trend. It's not an easy task. I would not say it's going to be an easy task. It's a serious uphill battle that all facets of society has to get involved in. Law enforcement is doing their part, even though a lot of persons may believe that we are not. But I want to say that we are doing our part as best as we can in the circumstance.
Well, as you pause there, I guess I'll try to not necessarily put you on the spot, but to some extent the public will have certain questions along those lines. As we're coming up to the break, though, I'll just ask this, like, to some extent, we're not really seeing things improving. And then on top of that, they already have issues where some bad apples, taint or make the whole service look bad. And that also plays into witnesses not wanting to necessarily come forward. If you have a 10% detection rate, why will I be confident that you could protect my life from being killed if I decide to come forward as a witness? A lot of these things are wider issues, right? Not everything is necessarily under the control of the service. There are other circumstances at play as well. Like, what would you potentially say to the public who is frustrated but might not understand all of the challenges, but then also would see some legitimate things that they will take issue with?
Now, I can understand the cry of the public, because it appears that we are not doing what is required, and you'll always get some incidents where we have a negative aspect of law enforcement, police officers involved in some things, some areas that actually cause our trust and confidence to continue to go down again. And every time these type of things happen, it degrades the trust and confidence in the public. But I'm not here to reassure the public, because I cannot reassure the public that tomorrow is going to be better, and the police service is going to be able to fix everything tomorrow. I am just simply saying that at this point in time, we need to work together as a country. It is not the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service responsibility alone to change the mindset of the children of tomorrow. Our responsibility is that of national security, yes, and we will take that responsibility. We are taking that responsibility, and all the criticisms that it comes with it, as the commissioner and the executive would have had their media brief yesterday in light of the number of homicides over the weekend. All right, the commissioner is under some serious stress and serious strain when it comes to the criminal activities in Trinidad and Tobago and the level of crime. So I know the executive is working behind the scenes to address with some of the issues, but I'm just simply saying that we need to work together as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. There are a lot of areas that need to be improved, not only in law enforcement alone. Our social services are there. What is happening in the schools? what is happening to the number of firearms that coming through our borders. There are a lot of things that are working, I would say, working against us, trying to solve, against Trinidad and Tobago, trying to get to treat with this crime surge that we're having. So it's not one arm alone, and I'm saying that it is a lot of persons. Everybody has to work together with one common goal. What is the common goal? Is it that our common goal is to reduce the amount of crimes in Trinidad and Tobago, right? Make every place in Trinidad and Tobago safe. But how can we do that? Look at what is happening in Tobago. Tobago has now, the number of homicides that they have in Tobago and the level of crime and criminal activities in Tobago, but we never thought it would have been such in Tobago. So it is not isolated to Trinidad. It is now stepping across to Tobago, and it is not auguring well for us in Trinidad and Tobago as a tourist destination or on the international scene. Whether we like it or not, we have to accept the fact that we are not in a good place and we have to work together, right? The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is doing their part, and I'm saying that everyone else has to step up to the plate.
Well, I'll close with this. I mean, I do wonder, the population tends to not want to be involved and they want someone else to solve it. And to some extent, I think they might not understand that in many ways, maybe indirectly, they have to be involved. They have to want it. Otherwise, society will be what it is. Do you think that the population is just too indifferent to be involved until it happens to them? Or perhaps is it that they're too afraid, they don't understand what it is they can do?
I think it might be. I think it might be all those factors put together, but it needs to have some, and parents on the whole needs to have parents and guardians. Some communities need to step up and say, listen, we are not tolerating it anymore, because it's persons within our communities are also dying. It's our friends, it's our families. Whether or not their society look at them in any particular light, I'm simply saying whether or not someone who is involved in criminal acts, when a life is lost, a life is lost. It doesn't matter who life is lost, right? A life is lost. So we have to look at it from this perspective. We lost 16 lives, I should say, over the weekend. It's 16 lives.
Okay.
Right? 16 lives over the weekend. 16 lives was violently taken away from communities. Parents, children, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, everyone suffered over the weekend. Whether we want to accept it or not and say, well, okay, all those persons were criminals and they were criminal, persons were gang related or otherwise. Whether it is gang related or not, they have families, they have communities they came from, and we lost lives. So the fact of the matter is that Trinidad and Tobago lost 16 citizens over this weekend, right? So we can argue about all the other areas, and I'm not here to judge anyone, but we, Trinidad and Tobago as a whole, and as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago sitting here now, it is not good to know that we have lost 16 lives over this weekend. That is not a good image for anybody. And I don't feel proud about it. I don't feel proud about it. And as a law enforcement officer, it is heartening to know that the amount of efforts you're putting out there, and we still lost 16 lives.
Well, folks, we will end things there. I assume that some of you may want to call in to speak on this. I don't know to what extent I should hope for you to be as alarmed as we are, but because it's not a nice thing to be in the middle of, but at the end of the day, we can't bury our heads in the sand. We're in the situation whether we like it or not. So with that said, we will open up the phone lines after the break. Stay tuned to talk about a WS, and we'll be right back after this.
7 is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
And we're back here, Sean Michael Small in Sandy Point, Ashraf Ali in WSN Studios in Woodbrook, 30 Gattaca Street. And we have our first caller for the morning because we're opening up the phone lines. Now, every time you have your say, please, though, if you're on the air, mute your TV, listen to us through the phone, just a gentle reminder. But our first caller, Diego Martin, you're on the air. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Caller, hello?
Yes, I'm here. Am I on with you, Sean?
Yes, go ahead. You're on the air.
Very good. I just wanted to call and really give some encouragement to the officer and his colleagues. I can hear the frustration in his voice. You know, I can hear that he has seemingly reached a point where, you know, I don't want to say he's ready to throw his hands up. I don't think that's it. But because he should have a job to do. But I can certainly understand the frustration that I'm hearing in his voice. Right? You talk about needing the community's involvement, and that's true. Because to turn around something like this, you do need the community to be involved. And there's a strategy for doing that. You have to come up with a strategy for actually reaching the community, right? I had proposed such a strategy to the officers here in Tobago, and they were supposed to treat with it, but I guess they decided not to. But there's a way in which you have to be able to get to the people. One of the things that you have to understand about African people, because that's where most of the crime is happening. Let's just call a spade a spade. Most of the crime is happening in the African communities, right? And there's something you have to understand about the African people. It's not that they're afraid so much, right? There's that thing of not trusting the police. There's that, right? And that goes all the way back to the plantation where police came out of the runaway slave catcher, right? That's something that has never been addressed or more or less corrected in the line of policing that police must do themselves. So there's that, right? What is also there is that the notion of snitching. You see, if they see something wrong, they wouldn't go and tell you because they don't want to snitch on that person. One, the criminals have really been able to get the message across that snitches get stitches. There's that. So I'm more afraid the gangster, because when they come in for everybody. So I'm not going to snitch on that person. But there's also ingrained in the community that you don't snitch. You understand? So what has to happen is the community has to be sort of re-socialized to understand who the real snitch is. Because the snitch was also born on the plantation. The snitch is the person that looked just like us out in the field, picking the cotton or the sugar or whatever, planning to burn down the plantation or planning to run away. And that person that looked like us, because he looked like us, we talked freely around him, would run back and tell the slave owner that we're planning to run away or planning to burn down the plantation. That's where the snitch was born. So the snitch is the person working against the interests of the community. You have to get that across to the community, right? So the criminal who is putting the community in fear, who's killing the children, doing drive-bys, killing everybody, is preventing the community from advancing. That's the real snitch. But the people think that they are the snitch if they tell on that person. So you have to do a structure, a program in place, and I'm willing to help with that. I have the idea for that. You have to get a psychological program across to the people to be able to identify who the real snitch is. You understand? That's a place to start, to arrest the problem where it actually is, because you also have to arrest that problem. Not only just like I said on Keaton's show, a lot of our efforts have to now go towards those children coming up who have not yet been indoctrinated and inoculated with gang life and those sort of things. You have to also get to them. That's very important. But there's a way to arrest the problem where it is now, and the community's help has to be involved in that. All right, I just want to share that with you.
All right, thanks, caller. We're sorry, we have to end things there. We have another caller on the line. That was caller from Tobago. This is Mr. Diego Martin. Mr. Diego Martin, you're on the air.
Mr. Small and the senior officer there.
Morning, sir.
I want to basically ask the senior officer and make some comment with respect to how I see the TTPS continue to drop the ball. And you made a comment that people basically, some of the younger ones, gravitating towards the gangs. And let me show you where the TTPS dropped the ball. 7 years ago, we had photographs of Komodo children with firearms. Was that fashionable? Was that the key, the cue for other people who minds are influenced so quickly to become egoistic and to take that position that, hey, fellas, we're not in the gang, but we have an ego just like them to hold a firearm and pose. Because if you watch all of the videos and the songs and things, they posing with it, the police service should have prosecuted that issue with the alleged minister children, bring it to a conclusion. It's still out there hanging. Where are those people getting FULs, etc.? That's all I say. The other thing is that I've continued to knock the TTPS. They continue to promote themselves and they don't have a product or service. Look what happens now in Trinidad. It is normalized. When somebody goes missing, the police goes into a recovery process most of the time, not to rescue the people. It becomes a homicide. We call upon the search and rescue team to help us locate those persons. Why is this so? Why there's not an immediate manhunt? When something like that happens, it shows that the TTPS and its leadership take a back seat and hope for a better outcome when they're not actually driving the outcome. Go and have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. I mean, I hesitate because I understand when you see certain things happen in a country like America. I don't know to what extent it's fair to say we should have those expectations for all of that to happen here. But Ashraf, I don't know if you want to make a comment on what the caller just said.
No. There's a lot of different things that the caller indicated there that, and I said that's his personal point of view, so I respect his personal point of view. When it comes to when he's speaking about when we have missing persons, one of the issues with missing persons, when you have children, you don't publish children. There is, in fact, when children we have found children. There's a lot of circumstances that surrounded that the information is not out, so the general public would not have known why that child or why those individuals went missing. It's unfortunate at some point in time, sometimes when persons go missing and we have the public looking for any assistance, and I have no problem with anybody when they lost their loved ones. They choose to look for any avenue for assistance. So they get the Hunter Search and Rescue to get assistance. It's assistance, the family is free to get some assistance to look for their loved ones. So the issue is not that we drop the ball. We are continuing our investigation. And it appears that persons believe, when everything that you see in other countries, you want to bring, you want it to be utilized in Trinidad and Tobago. But I always say, if you want a system to work, you can't bring piece of the system. You have to bring the whole system to see how it's going to function. And we cannot bring the whole entire system because that entire system across it has a lot of different elements towards it, right? So if you're bringing that entire system, you have to bring the whole system to see to get the benefit of it. You can't use part to get the benefit of it. So yes, we continue to say that the police service dropped the ball, continue to drop the ball. But I want to put out again, is it the police service dropping the ball or is Trinidad and Tobago dropping the ball?
I mean,
Trinidad.
That's a good question there to ask, but I actually would have attempted to respond to it, but we do have Faisal on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so what I would sum it up as the one word is incompetence. And when I say incompetence, I mean incompetence that the people who is in governance. Anytime you're having public spat with the independent office of the police commissioner, like what happened with Gary and company, you would find this is the end result. And they come with a flawed excuse, I want to call it, that the commissioner was new and she need a year to get she foot wet. Let me tell you something. As an aspirant police commissioner, you need to be up and ready and running for the job. It's a job that you are hoping to get. So this thing about getting your feet wet is just nepotism and incompetence. That's where the country is at because of that. Okay, gentlemen?
Okay, caller. Okay, we have another caller waiting on the line from San Fernando. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Morning, ESPLE.
Morning, sir.
I'm confident. I look at you, ESPLE, and I am a bit set back by you this morning because this is not your normal demeanor, and it speaks volumes to what's happening and the discourse as well as what's happening within the TTPS. I would look at the TTPS and all these programs that you have. You are a media ambassador. You are all. And I am wondering if all these things have run their course, because the commissioner seems to be putting a hand up in the air, and I am not sure that the government is understanding. There's a soft approach that the country has taken. In addition to the TTPS, the government, all these programs that they are offering the youth, because there's an underlying failure of youth in terms of the education system that is partly fueling this gravitation to crime, to crime and criminal activity. However, the police has the law enforcement on the whole has to understand that in addition to all these soft approaches and community approaches and reaching out, that force is needed. And it seems to me that is an element that is missing. At the end of the day, the criminal has to understand, I keep saying this, we had enough and we ain't taking this no more. And there is enough law enforcement personnel in this country between all the agencies that there are, in my opinion, to arrest the situation, to have a serious pushback and let them pull back and let them understand, hey, we really have to stop this, or we really have to pull back on this. There is enough, but there is no strategy. It seems as if in the National Security Council can't put these agencies together to come up with a proper plan to deal with the situation, because this is no longer. And I hear what you're saying in SPRD about this Trinidad and Tobago problem. It's not just the police, it's the communities, the people, yes. But their law enforcement has to put something together. And I say law enforcement because it's not just the police service that is needed in this situation. And I am disappointed with the way everything is happening, where there is no cohesion within law enforcement, enough cohesion. There's enough personnel there between the police, the army, the SSA, the Coast Guard, the Air Guard. There's enough personnel to deal with the situation in this country. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. I'll just say this. We have Shogun Sanem, but I'll just say this. Apparently, there's an overtime racket in Wassa. I haven't been, or there was slash is. I haven't been able to get to that. I have already gone on record to call out the fact that, look, there's a fraction of the public service. It might be a large fraction. It might be a small fraction. It's significant either way. That essentially is a waste of time. And in law enforcement, no offense to any of your colleagues who you might know ASP Ali, but I will hazard, I guess, that there's a fraction of law enforcement officers, agents, soldiers, pilots, etc., who are a waste of time. So I don't know if it is correct to say we have enough people. Or rather, maybe to be more accurate, it might be true we have enough people. I just don't know if we have enough good people. With that said, we have Shogun on line, and then ASP, you could respond after. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good day, gentlemen.
Morning.
I must remind you that the purpose of government is to optimize the standard of living of the people. And this is done by maintaining law and order. And law and order is maintained by enforcing the law. And that is the problem. We do not enforce all our laws. This creates an environment that encourages crime. I have pointed out to you what happened in East Drive, which was a very community, and you had the slum clearance program, and government, when they cleared the slums, they stopped and they started to leave the people there. Government have gone further now, and they have sabotaged the whole public service. They are the law and order people. The police is just further on the ground. Right? You don't have anybody, you have a lot of people not getting to country planning. Nothing is done about that. But the government want to improve the law without saying what's wrong with the law. There's nothing wrong with the law except they don't enforce it. We had roads. The government had works department and whatever you should maintain roads. They made the agency which they had to close down it because it was staffed with political crooks. And that is the problem. It is a matter of law and order. And the reason the politicians don't say that is if you look at it from that perspective, them is the biggest coup. They're the one who, if you had to go and get a contract now, you have to pay a bribe at 20 or 30%. Any questions, gentlemen?
No caller. We have another caller waiting. But
okay,
I agree with your point. But thank you for the call. I'll just say when the caller from Jagona says we do not enforce all of our laws, he's not just talking about violent crime and things like that. Regulations, things in law that the government is supposed to enforce, the small things, the little things. Breakdowns in society is encouraging more lawlessness. It might not be the only reason, but it's still an important factor. We have Mova on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
It would seem that Trinidadians are finally beginning to understand. Sean, our problem today did not start last week. It didn't start 2 months ago. We have had a country being run without law enforcement for too long, and we have political scientists and we have what criminologists who somehow don't seem to want to speak the truth. Our problems in Trinidad and Tobago started since in the 60s. It didn't start just now. But we are not honest enough to admit that. Okay, that is the problem. It started a long time ago. Plus, Sean, the police service in Trinidad and Tobago, and this has a lot to do with political interference and political watering down, if you want to put it that way. If you look back at the history of the police service, there have been a lot of, Pastor Dutton says it all the time, one of the major stains on the police service is that Achilles chamber situation. But notwithstanding, there are a lot of stains on the police service that people seem to forget. A policeman, a senior police officer playing with a gun in a Wallace night party, kills a man, and then goes in court and says he thought it was a toy gun. You see, we forget all these things. Two police officers arresting 3 men in St. James for loitering. And somehow, somebody comes a fight breaks out between one of the police officers and one of the gentlemen, and someone comes from nowhere and stabs the gentleman 11 times with a stick, and police couldn't recognize. You see, it's a whole history of nasty things, I want to put it that way, that has happened in this country. Plus this constant failure to deal with corruption. This country is now overflowing in filth. You know, and it didn't start last week. And another thing too that I find, and it disturbs me greatly, that our political scientists and our criminologists fail to deal with one little aspect that's in front of our eyes. That somehow, why is it that our worst crime statistics keep happening under a particular government? But we're not dealing with that at all. We act as if we don't realize that. And there's too much dishonesty in this country. We need to start to be honest, and everybody needs to start doing their jobs in this country. Otherwise, we'll just get worse. And you see, this government that people like so much, I rest my case.
Caller, thank you. Although, I mean, arguably, how many times was the PNM not in power? I guess kind of might cause that statistic that you're basically citing there to maybe not be so straightforwardly accurate. If PNM is in power most of the time, most of the bad situations are going to happen under them. Although, to be fair, that in and of itself is still a personal question. Well, they are in power and it is happening under them. But I don't know if I would want to necessarily say, well, one party is better than the other with regards to crime. I don't really see the improvement when other political parties come into power. I don't really see it, but that's just me. ASPLE, I don't know if you wanted to comment on anything that any of the callers have said so far before, because we're going to have to wrap up the show soon.
Not necessarily comment on individually, but I just want to just say across the board. Yes, the police service is responsible for public safety and security within Trinidad and Tobago. We are responsible for ensuring that citizens feel safe. We are responsible for enforcing the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And yes, I would agree in some aspects of it. There are elements in the police service that has not lived up to that responsibility, and we do in fact have officers who are not, I would say, who didn't do what they were supposed to do, and it gave us it stay in the reputation of the police service. And like all organizations, we do it is not something that we are proud of, but we do have elements in the service that is not as professional as we would like it to be. Notwithstanding all of that, there are plenty of police officers, and the vast majority of police officers are good officers, and who give and continue to give. They have families, they leave their families and they come outside here. We can leave their communities and come out here to serve Trinidad and Tobago. But at the end of the day, when you look at the number of police officers that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, as compared to the number of citizens in Trinidad and Tobago, and the level of criminals and the number of criminals we have, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, there are plenty more law-abiding citizens than criminal elements in Trinidad and Tobago. So we have not lost. I am not saying that we have lost. That Trinidad and Tobago is gone. It is just that we need to step up to the plate. There is much more that we have to do. We cannot solve crime by just arresting an individual and there's no one coming forward. Persons need to step forward. You don't need to come to the police to set a standard in your community and say this is not what we accept in our community. We are not. I can't come and tell you how to police your household, how to police inside in your community. You, the citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, have to do that, and that is what we are continuing to say. That if you don't take responsibility for some of the things that is happening in Trinidad and Tobago and blaming everyone else, then we are going nowhere. Right? Yes, we are fighting a battle. Right? We may lost some battles, but at the end of the day, we have to fight. We have to win the war against crime, because it's going to affect every one of us, whether we like it or not. And when you look at some of the crimes that has taken place and the locations the crimes are taking place, it's really worrying because we can have collateral damage. The triple homicide that took place in the Conopia district was at a restaurant, outside of a restaurant, sorry, and multiple persons inside the restaurants could have been injured. And we realized that there were collateral damages and persons got shot in different areas with the quadruple murders where 8 persons and 12 persons getting injured, and we have fatalities at the same time. So it is not to say that it's going to bypass all of us. So if we just keep saying it's not our responsibility, it's someone else's responsibility, at what point in time will the community and the persons and the parents and the parents and those persons who live in a particular community say, listen, we are not tolerating it anymore?
Well, I want to just cap it off right there, because I think also we need to understand, and now I will tie it into the political dimension, as well as tie two things that two of the callers mentioned. Part of it is we have to be involved in our politics, because our politics is involved as they are basically the practitioners of governance, because they are government. One caller said that we don't enforce all of our laws, and I translated it further to say, well, breakdowns in society lead to more lawlessness, breakdowns in bureaucracy, breakdowns in how things are administered and run. And then another caller did say that, look, there's political interference and watering down. And we put those two things together. Political interference encourages more lawlessness because they themselves look for the loopholes, whether it's to get somebody a job, whether it is to call the commissioner, WhatsApp him to say that they want FULs for their protective detail, and apparently that's not the first time something like that has happened, regardless of the legality of it. The gray areas, exploiting the loopholes in the system, not necessarily living up to levels of accountability. The employees, the workers see that of the supervisors and the managers and the high officials in government. And I would argue that if the unions could argue with having too many workers and it's the government's fault and council's fault and stuff like that, to some extent, while I don't think nepotism hires in the police service are necessarily a thing, political interference, it might not be telling the police who to arrest, but to some extent there will be interference. There will be some degree of influence, as well as the fact of just officers looking around and seeing the lawlessness all over society and saying, why are we expected to be straight-laced and straight-edged? Why can't we, those who do skirt the system? It encourages officers as well, who doesn't see a country highly motivated to do the right thing, highly patriotic. Why would we expect them to somehow magically be so? They come from our society. And with that said, we'll close the show there. I want to thank all of our callers as well as the ASP for joining me today in what probably is not necessarily the first time we've had a sad Monday morning, but ASP, as you pointed out at the start of your discourse, this was a particularly sad day with the news from this weekend. And folks, well, the ASP has said all that he has to say, and so have I. I'll just remind you to always be a brother's keeper. Make today a good day, as my co-host always says. Remember your allegiance to an island republic. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.